Sarah Martinez stood in front of her bedroom mirror, gently touching her rounded belly. 6 months pregnant and glowing with happiness, she smiled at her reflection. The baby kicked softly, and she whispered loving words to her unborn child. Her life seemed perfect in every way possible. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of their million-dollar mansion. Sarah walked downstairs to the marble kitchen, where fresh flowers decorated every counter. Their housekeeper Maria had already prepared breakfast and left it warming in the oven. Sarah lived like a queen, and she knew how lucky she was. David Martinez, her husband of 3 years, had built an empire from nothing. Martinez Industries was now worth over $50 million, making him one of the youngest successful CEOs in the city. Sarah remembered when they first met at a charity event 5 years ago. David was charming, handsome, and ambitious. He swept her off her feet with expensive dinners, weekend trips, and promises of a beautiful future together. Their wedding had been featured in society magazines. 200 guests watched as they exchanged vows in a ceremony that cost more than most people made in a year. Sarah wore a designer dress worth $30,000, and David looked like a prince in his custom suit. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. Sarah spent her days planning their baby's nursery. She had chosen soft yellow walls because they wanted the gender to be a surprise. The room was filled with the most expensive baby furniture money could buy. Tiny clothes hung in the closet, and stuffed animals sat waiting for their little owner to arrive. As the wife of a prominent CEO, Sarah attended charity galas, fundraising events, and business dinners. She always looked perfect with her designer clothes, professional makeup, and bright smile. Other wives envied her lifestyle, and Sarah played her role beautifully. She supported David's career, hosted dinner parties for his business partners, and never complained about his long working hours. But lately, something felt different. David came home later each night, claiming he had important meetings or urgent projects. His phone buzzed constantly during dinner, and he would excuse himself to take calls in private. When Sarah asked about his day, David gave short answers and changed the subject quickly. Sarah tried to ignore the growing distance between them. She told herself that running a successful company required sacrifices. David worked hard to provide their luxurious lifestyle, and she should be grateful instead of complaining. But her heart felt heavy with worry. The baby furniture store called that afternoon to confirm delivery of the crib. Sarah was excited to finally complete the nursery, but when she called David to share the news, his secretary said he was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. This was becoming a pattern. David seemed less interested in baby preparations and more focused on work than ever before. That evening, Sarah prepared David's favorite meal, hoping to reconnect with her husband. She set the dining room table with their best china and lit candles to create a romantic atmosphere. She wore a beautiful maternity dress that David had complimented before. When David finally arrived home at 9 o'clock, he barely looked at the elaborate dinner. He sat down, checked his phone, and ate quickly without conversation. Sarah asked about his day and shared her excitement about the baby's recent doctor visit. The heartbeat was strong, and everything looked healthy. David nodded absently while typing on his phone. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. This wasn't the man who used to hang on her every word. This wasn't the husband who once said she was the most important thing in his life. After dinner, David disappeared into his home office for another conference call. Sarah cleaned up alone, wondering when their perfect life had started feeling so empty. She touched her belly and made a silent promise to her unborn child that she would figure out what was wrong and fix their family. As she prepared for bed, Sarah heard David's voice through his office door. He was laughing in a way she hadn't heard in months. His tone was warm and affectionate, the way he used to talk to her. Sarah's heart ached with longing and confusion. Little did Sarah know that her perfect world was about to collapse completely. The man she trusted with her life was planning something that would change everything forever. Sarah woke up Tuesday morning feeling determined to reconnect with her husband. She decided to surprise David at his office with his favorite Chinese takeout, from the restaurant where they had their first date. Maybe bringing back good memories would help bridge the growing gap between them. The rain poured down heavily as Sarah drove through the city streets. Her pregnancy made driving more difficult, but she was excited about her surprise visit. She imagined David's face lighting up when she walked through his office door with dinner. They could eat together and talk like they used to before everything became so complicated. Martinez Industries occupied the top 5 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Sarah had visited many times before and knew all the security guards by name. They smiled and waved as she entered the marble lobby carrying bags of food. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt longer than usual as her excitement grew. Sarah used her key card to access the executive floor. David had given it to her years ago, saying she should always feel welcome in his workplace. The hallway was quiet since most employees had gone home hours earlier. Only a few lights remained on in the corner offices where the most dedicated workers stayed late. As Sarah approached David's office, she heard voices coming from the conference room next door. The glass walls allowed her to see inside, and what she saw made her heart stop beating. David was there, but he wasn't working. He was holding Monica, his secretary, in a passionate embrace. Sarah dropped the food bags, but somehow managed to stay hidden behind a pillar. Her hands shook as she watched her husband kiss another woman with the same intensity he once saved for her. Monica was young, blonde, and beautiful. She wore an expensive dress and jewelry that Sarah recognized as gifts David claimed were for important clients. The conversation that followed destroyed Sarah's world completely. She heard David tell Monica that he loved her and couldn't wait to be free from his current situation. Sarah's pregnancy had been an accident, he said. His wife was becoming a burden that prevented him from living the life he really wanted. Monica laughed softly and suggested they needed to find a permanent solution to their problem. She mentioned that accidents happened to pregnant women all the time, especially on dangerous mountain roads. After the baby was born, they could make Sarah's death look natural. David would inherit everything, and they could start fresh somewhere far away. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. The man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was discussing her murder as casually as planning a vacation. She pressed her hand against her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Her baby kicked as if sensing her terror. David agreed with Monica's suggestion and said they should move quickly. Sarah's trust fund was worth $50 million, and combined with his business assets, they would have enough money to disappear forever. Monica smiled and said she had already researched the perfect location for their accident. The winding mountain road to Sarah's doctor's office had several dangerous curves where cars frequently went off the cliff. Sarah stumbled backward toward the elevator, her vision blurry with tears. She managed to escape the building without being seen, but felt like she was living in a nightmare. The rain soaked through her clothes as she sat in her car, shaking with fear and disbelief. Everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. Her loving husband was a cold-blooded killer. Her perfect marriage was a facade hiding deadly betrayal. The man who had promised to protect her was planning to murder her for money. As Sarah drove home through the storm, she realized she was completely alone. David was sleeping next to her every night while plotting her death. She couldn't trust anyone connected to him or his business. Her unborn baby's life was also in danger. Sarah pulled into their garage and sat in the darkness, trying to process what she had discovered. She needed to be smart and careful if she wanted to survive. David couldn't know that she had uncovered his deadly plan. Sarah barely slept that night. She lay in bed next to David, watching him breathe peacefully while her heart raced with terror. The man who had held her during nightmares was now the source of her worst fears. Every time he moved in his sleep, Sarah flinched, wondering if he was dreaming about killing her. The next morning, Sarah forced herself to act normal. She made breakfast and smiled when David kissed her cheek before leaving for work. The moment his car disappeared down their driveway, Sarah began planning her survival. She knew she needed evidence before anyone would believe her incredible story. Sarah drove to an electronics store and bought tiny recording devices that could be hidden around their house. Her hands trembled as she placed them in David's office, their bedroom, and the kitchen where he often took phone calls. She also purchased a small camera that looked like a pen and kept it in her purse at all times. Next, Sarah contacted a private investigator named Jake Morrison. She told him she suspected her husband was having an affair and needed proof for divorce proceedings. Jake was expensive, but had an excellent reputation for discretion. Sarah paid him with money from her personal account that David couldn't monitor. Over the following days, Sarah discovered that her situation was far worse than she had imagined. Jake's surveillance revealed that David and Monica met regularly at expensive hotels throughout the city. They acted like a couple deeply in love, holding hands and kissing in public places where Sarah's friends might see them. The recordings from Sarah's hidden devices revealed even more shocking information. David had been planning his betrayal for over 2 years. Monica wasn't just his secretary and mistress. She was also his partner in stealing money from Martinez Industries. They had been transferring funds to secret bank accounts in Switzerland and other countries where the money couldn't be traced. Sarah listened in horror as David and Monica discussed their detailed plan. They had already stolen over $20 million from the company and planned to blame Sarah for the theft after her death. David would play the role of the devastated husband who discovered his wife's crimes too late to save her life. The murder plan was carefully designed to look like an accident. Sarah's regular doctor appointments provided the perfect opportunity. The mountain road to her doctor's office was narrow and dangerous, with steep cliffs and sharp turns. Many accidents had happened there over the years. David and Monica had studied Sarah's routine for months. They knew she always took the same route at the same time every week. They planned to hire professional criminals to cause a collision that would send Sarah's car over the cliff. The crash would kill both Sarah and her unborn baby instantly. Jake's investigation revealed that Monica had already contacted people who specialized in making murders look like accidents. These criminals had no connection to David or Monica, making it impossible to trace the crime back to them. David would have a perfect alibi, probably meeting with important clients when the accident occurred. Sarah realized that David's recent behavior changes made perfect sense now. He was distant because he was preparing to become a widower. He showed no interest in baby preparations because he never intended for their child to be born. Every loving gesture was fake, designed to maintain his cover until the murder could happen. The most heartbreaking discovery was listening to David laugh about their marriage. He told Monica that Sarah was naive and trusting, making her the perfect victim. He had never loved her but married her for her family's money and social connections. Sarah was just a stepping stone to the wealthy lifestyle he wanted with Monica. Sarah sat in her car after another doctor's appointment, staring at the dangerous curve where David planned to end her life. She could see exactly how the accident would happen. A car would ram her from behind, sending her vehicle through the weak guardrail and down the rocky cliff. Time was running out. Sarah's baby was due in 3 months, and David wanted to execute his plan soon. She needed to act quickly to save both their lives. Sarah knew she had to be smarter than David if she wanted to survive. She couldn't let him know that she had discovered his deadly secret. Her life and her baby's life depended on her acting skills. She had to become the perfect wife while secretly planning her escape. Every morning, Sarah woke up and smiled at David like nothing had changed. She made his coffee exactly how he liked it and kissed him goodbye at the door. Inside, her stomach twisted with fear and disgust, but her face showed only love and happiness. She had become an actress playing the most important role of her life. Sarah contacted her sister Emma, who lived in another state. Without revealing the full truth, Sarah told Emma that she was having marriage problems and might need help soon. Emma was confused but promised to support her sister no matter what happened. Sarah gave Emma copies of all the evidence she had collected, telling her to keep them safe and call the police if anything happened. The hardest part was sitting through family dinners with David. He would hold her hand and talk about their future together, while Sarah knew he was planning her murder. He asked about her doctor appointments and seemed genuinely concerned about her health. Sarah realized that David was an excellent liar who could fake emotions perfectly. Sarah began working with a forensic accountant named Robert Chen who specialized in finding hidden money. She told him she suspected financial problems at her husband's company and needed to protect her investments. Robert discovered the secret bank accounts and traced millions of dollars that David and Monica had stolen over the years. With Robert's help, Sarah contacted Agent Maria Rodriguez from the FBI's white-collar crime division. Sarah explained that she had evidence of embezzlement and conspiracy, but couldn't reveal everything yet because her life was in danger. Agent Rodriguez was skeptical at first, but became very interested when Sarah showed her the recorded conversations and financial evidence. Sarah started carrying a small recording device everywhere she went. She documented every conversation with David, building a legal case that would destroy him completely. She learned to ask innocent questions that made David reveal more details about his plans without realizing what he was doing. One evening, David received a phone call that made him very excited. Sarah pretended to read a magazine while listening carefully. David was talking to someone about moving up their timeline because Sarah was getting too curious about his work schedule. They needed to act within the next 2 weeks before she became suspicious. After David hung up, he was unusually affectionate with Sarah. He rubbed her shoulders and talked about how much he loved her. Sarah's skin crawled at his touch, but she smiled and told him how lucky she felt to have such a wonderful husband. David's eyes were cold even as he spoke loving words. Sarah began changing her daily routine slightly. She took different routes to her doctor appointments and varied her shopping times. She told David she was feeling restless and wanted to explore new places before the baby came. David seemed annoyed by these changes, but couldn't object without seeming suspicious. The pregnancy made everything more complicated because Sarah had to protect 2 lives instead of 1. She started carrying emergency supplies in her car, including a phone charger, water, and snacks. She also began wearing a panic button disguised as jewelry that would alert Agent Rodriguez if she was in immediate danger. Sarah's acting skills were tested every night when David came home. She had to pretend to be excited when he talked about their future while knowing he planned to murder her soon. She laughed at his jokes and shared gossip about their friends while her heart broke with each lie. The most difficult moment came when David suggested they take a romantic weekend trip before the baby arrived. Sarah knew this might be another opportunity for him to kill her in a remote location. She had to decline without making him suspicious, so she claimed her doctor had advised against travel due to pregnancy complications. Sarah decided to force David's hand by pretending to discover his affair in a controlled way. She needed him to think she was still naive and unsuspecting while secretly preparing her trap. The plan was dangerous, but Sarah had no choice if she wanted to catch David before he could kill her. Sarah planted one of Monica's earrings in their bedroom where she would easily find it. She had stolen the earring from Monica's desk during a visit to David's office, making sure security cameras captured her innocent conversation with the secretary. Now Sarah could pretend the discovery was accidental. On a Saturday morning, Sarah made a big show of finding the earring while cleaning their bedroom. She held it up with shaking hands and confronted David with tears streaming down her face. She accused him of having an affair and demanded to know who the woman was. Her performance was perfect because her pain was real, even though she already knew the truth. David's reaction was everything Sarah expected. He looked shocked and hurt, denying everything at first. Then he slowly admitted to making a mistake with his secretary, but swore it meant nothing. He begged Sarah to forgive him, promising to end the relationship immediately and focus on their marriage and baby. Sarah watched David lie to her face with amazing skill. His tears looked genuine, and his voice cracked with emotion as he apologized. If she hadn't overheard his murder plans, Sarah might have believed his performance. Instead, she saw the cold calculation behind his loving words. That night, Sarah pretended to sleep while David made phone calls in his office. She heard him tell Monica that Sarah had found out about their affair, but seemed to believe his lies. They needed to move quickly now because Sarah might become more suspicious or decide to file for divorce. David wanted to execute their murder plan within the next few days. Agent Rodriguez had been monitoring David's phone calls and confirmed that he was planning something urgent. She agreed to help Sarah set a trap, but warned that it would be extremely dangerous. Sarah would have to put herself in real danger to catch David in the act of attempted murder. The plan was complex and required perfect timing. Sarah would continue her normal routine, including her weekly doctor appointments on the dangerous mountain road. Agent Rodriguez would position undercover agents along the route and wire Sarah's car with tracking devices and recording equipment. Sarah also made legal preparations to protect herself and her baby. She transferred all of David's company shares that she legally owned into a trust fund for their unborn child. Even if something went wrong with their plan, David wouldn't be able to profit from her death. Sarah also updated her will to leave everything to her sister Emma instead of David. The most difficult part was continuing to act like a forgiving wife. Sarah had to pretend that David's apology had satisfied her and that she trusted him again. She made his favorite meals and talked about baby names, all while knowing he was planning to kill them both within days. David seemed relieved that Sarah had forgiven him so easily. He became more affectionate and attentive, probably trying to keep her calm until he could execute his plan. Sarah had to fight not to vomit when he touched her belly, and talked about how excited he was to become a father. Monica continued working as David's secretary, pretending that nothing had changed. Sarah visited the office once more and had coffee with Monica, studying the woman who wanted her dead. Monica was charming and friendly, asking about the baby and complimenting Sarah's pregnancy glow. Her performance was almost as good as David's. Agent Rodriguez called Sarah with updates about the investigation. The FBI had identified the criminals David had hired to cause the accident. They were dangerous men with experience in making murders look accidental. The agents were ready to arrest them the moment they made their move against Sarah. Sarah spent her last peaceful evening at home trying to memorize every detail of her life before everything changed forever. She sat in the baby's nursery, touching the tiny clothes and wondering if her child would ever get to wear them. Tomorrow she would drive to her doctor's appointment, knowing that David's killers would be waiting for her on the mountain road. The trap was set, but Sarah knew that even with FBI protection, she might not survive the next 24 hours. She wrote a letter to her unborn baby, explaining everything that had happened, and sealed it in an envelope for Emma to deliver if the worst happened. As Sarah prepared for bed, David held her close and told her how much he loved her. His voice was warm and convincing, but Sarah could feel the coldness in his heart. Tomorrow would reveal which of them was truly the better actor. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cloudy, matching Sarah's dark mood. She woke up early and prepared for what might be the last day of her life. David was already gone, having left for an important meeting that would give him a perfect alibi when the accident happened. Sarah knew this meeting was probably fake, just another part of his elaborate plan. Sarah dressed carefully in comfortable clothes that would allow her to move quickly if needed. She ate a light breakfast, not wanting to feel sick during the confrontation ahead. Her baby kicked strongly, as if sensing the danger they were about to face together. Sarah whispered promises to her unborn child that she would do everything possible to keep them both safe. Agent Rodriguez called to confirm that all the FBI agents were in position along the mountain route. Sarah's car had been fitted with tracking devices, recording equipment, and a special emergency signal that would immediately alert every agent if she was in trouble. Sarah felt slightly more confident knowing that help was nearby, but she also knew that anything could go wrong. Sarah drove toward her doctor's office using the same route she had taken every week for months. The mountain road was narrow and winding, with steep cliffs on one side and rocky walls on the other. There were very few places where other cars could pass safely, making it the perfect location for David's planned accident. About halfway up the mountain, Sarah noticed a black SUV in her rearview mirror keeping pace with her car. Her heart started beating faster as she realized these must be the killers David had hired. Sarah activated the emergency signal to alert Agent Rodriguez and continued driving at a steady speed, trying not to show that she had noticed her followers. The SUV stayed behind Sarah for several miles, probably waiting for the right spot to make their move. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she approached the most dangerous curve on the mountain road. This was where David had planned for her to die, where her car would go over the cliff and crash into the rocks below. Suddenly, the SUV accelerated and moved into the left lane, as if trying to pass Sarah's car. But instead of passing, the driver turned sharply toward Sarah, trying to ram her vehicle off the road. Sarah was ready for this attack because Agent Rodriguez had helped her practice the escape maneuver with a professional stunt driver. At the last possible second, Sarah yanked her steering wheel to the right and hit the brakes hard. Her car skidded toward what looked like solid rock wall, but Sarah knew there was a hidden side road that the FBI had discovered during their preparation. Sarah's car shot through a gap in the rocks that was barely wide enough for her vehicle. The SUV driver wasn't prepared for Sarah's sudden escape. He was going too fast to stop or change direction. The heavy SUV crashed through the guardrail and tumbled down the mountainside, rolling over and over before smashing into the rocks at the bottom of the cliff. The sound of metal crunching and glass breaking echoed through the mountains. Sarah's car came to a stop on the hidden side road, her heart pounding with adrenaline and fear. She was alive, and her baby was still moving normally inside her belly. The trap had worked perfectly. Within minutes, FBI agents surrounded the crash site and began rescuing the hired killers from their destroyed vehicle. Both criminals survived the crash but were badly injured. As paramedics treated their wounds, the men immediately began talking, trying to make deals with the FBI agents. They didn't want to face attempted murder charges and were willing to testify against whoever had hired them to kill Sarah. Agent Rodriguez called Sarah to confirm that she was safe and the killers were in custody. The agents had recorded everything, including the criminal's confession that David Martinez had paid them $50,000 to make Sarah's death look like an accident. The evidence was clear and undeniable. Sarah drove to the police station instead of her doctor's office. She needed to give her statement while everything was fresh in her memory. As she sat in the FBI office, Sarah felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. She had survived David's murder attempt, but her marriage was truly over now. The hardest part was knowing that David was probably at his fake meeting, waiting for news of her death. He would pretend to be shocked and heartbroken when he heard about the accident. Sarah wondered how long he would maintain his act before realizing that his plan had failed completely. Agent Rodriguez explained that they now had enough evidence to arrest David and Monica immediately. The hired killers were already providing detailed information about how David had contacted them and planned the murder. Monica's involvement in both the murder plot and the money stealing would also be proven in court. Sarah felt her baby kick again, and she smiled for the first time in weeks. They had both survived David's deadly betrayal. Now it was time for justice to be served. Sarah looked forward to seeing David's face when he realized that his perfect plan had backfired completely. The woman he had tried to eliminate was not only alive, but had evidence to destroy him forever. Sarah's revenge was just beginning, and David had no idea what was coming next. The hired killers faced serious charges that could put them in prison for the rest of their lives. Attempted murder, conspiracy, and reckless endangerment were just the beginning of their legal problems. Within hours of the failed attack, both men were begging to make deals with the FBI in exchange for lighter sentences. Agent Rodriguez sat across from the criminals in separate interrogation rooms, recording every word they said. The men provided detailed information about how David had contacted them through criminal networks and paid them $50,000 to kill Sarah. They had emails, text messages, and bank records proving David's involvement in the murder plot. Meanwhile, Sarah decided to give David one final chance to reveal his true character. She wanted to record him showing his real personality when he thought nobody was listening. Agent Rodriguez agreed to wire Sarah for this dangerous conversation, knowing it would provide even stronger evidence for court. Sarah drove home that evening, pretending to be shaken by a close call with reckless drivers on the mountain road. She parked in their garage and took several deep breaths before walking into the house where David was waiting to hear news of her death. Instead, he would see his very much alive wife walking through the front door. David was in his office when Sarah entered the house. She called out to him in a trembling voice, saying she had experienced something terrible on her way to the doctor. David came running, and his face showed genuine shock when he saw Sarah standing there unharmed. For just a moment, his mask slipped and Sarah saw real panic in his eyes. But David recovered quickly and transformed into the concerned husband again. He held Sarah close and asked what had happened, his voice full of worry and love. Sarah described the dangerous SUV that had tried to run her off the road, watching David's face carefully as she spoke. He was recording every word through the hidden wire she wore. David played his role perfectly, expressing relief that Sarah was safe and anger at the reckless drivers who had endangered her life. He suggested they call the police to report the incident, probably hoping to control the investigation. Sarah agreed, knowing that Agent Rodriguez was already handling everything behind the scenes. As they sat together on their living room couch, Sarah mentioned feeling unsafe and wanting to move somewhere more secure until the baby was born. She wanted to see how David would respond to this suggestion that would interfere with any future murder attempts he might plan. David's reaction confirmed Sarah's worst fears about his intentions. Instead of supporting her desire for safety, he insisted that she was overreacting to a random incident. He said moving would be unnecessary and expensive, and that Sarah should continue her normal routine. David even offered to drive her to future doctor appointments himself, probably planning to be more directly involved in her next murder. That night, Sarah pretended to sleep while David made phone calls from his office. The wire she wore picked up his frustrated conversation with Monica about their failed plan. David complained that the hired killers were idiots who had somehow botched a simple job. Monica suggested they needed a new approach quickly before Sarah became too suspicious or decided to hire bodyguards. The conversation revealed even more details about their crimes. David and Monica discussed the millions of dollars they had stolen from his company and their plans to disappear to Switzerland after Sarah's death. They talked about forging documents to make it look like Sarah had been responsible for the missing money, destroying her reputation even after her murder. Sarah listened with growing amazement at how cold and calculating these two people were. They spoke about her death like planning a business meeting, showing no emotion or regret about killing an innocent woman and her unborn child. Their greed and selfishness were beyond anything Sarah had imagined possible. Agent Rodriguez was monitoring the conversation from an FBI van parked nearby. Every word David and Monica spoke was being recorded as evidence that would be used against them in court. The agents were amazed by how much additional information the criminals were providing about their schemes. The next morning, David seemed more attentive and loving than he had been in months. He made Sarah breakfast and suggested they spend the day together shopping for baby supplies. Sarah realized this was probably another attempt to keep her calm and unsuspecting while he planned a new way to kill her. Sarah agreed to spend the day with David, knowing it would be their last day together as husband and wife. She was still wearing the recording device, capturing every moment of David's fake affection and concern. By tomorrow, he would be in prison and their marriage would be over forever. As they walked through baby stores picking out clothes and toys, Sarah felt sad about the family they would never have. Despite everything David had done, part of her still remembered the man she had fallen in love with years ago, but that person had probably never existed. David had always been a liar and manipulator, just better at hiding his true nature in the beginning. The evidence against David and Monica was now overwhelming. Agent Rodriguez had recorded conversations, financial records, witness testimony, and the failed murder attempt. Sarah's nightmare was almost over, and justice was finally within reach. Wednesday morning arrived like any other day, but Sarah knew it would be anything but ordinary. She woke up early and watched David get ready for work, knowing this would be the last time she would see him as a free man. Agent Rodriguez had called the night before to confirm that the arrests would happen at exactly 9 o'clock that morning. David kissed Sarah goodbye at the front door, telling her he had important meetings all day and might be home late. Sarah smiled and wished him luck, fighting back the urge to tell him that his luck had just run out completely. She watched his car disappear down their driveway for the final time. At exactly 9 o'clock, FBI agents surrounded the Martinez Industries building. Agent Rodriguez led a team of 6 agents to the 40th floor, where David was meeting with his board of directors about quarterly profits. The irony was perfect because David was discussing money he had stolen when the agents arrived to arrest him. The elevator doors opened, and Agent Rodriguez stepped out with her badge clearly visible. The entire board of directors watched in shock as she announced that David Martinez was under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and embezzlement. David's face went completely white as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. David tried to maintain his innocence, claiming there must be some mistake and demanding to call his lawyer. But Agent Rodriguez read him his rights and explained that they had overwhelming evidence, including recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony from the hired killers who had already confessed everything. At the same moment, FBI agents were arresting Monica at her apartment across town. She had been packing suitcases when they knocked on her door, probably preparing to run away if David's plan had succeeded. Monica screamed and cried as they arrested her, claiming she was innocent and had been forced to help David against her will. Sarah watched the arrests on live television from her sister Emma's house, where she had gone for safety. The local news stations covered the story extensively, with reporters standing outside Martinez Industries describing David as a millionaire CEO accused of plotting his pregnant wife's murder for money. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness as she watched her husband's reputation crumble on national television. The evidence against David and Monica was so strong that their lawyers advised them to consider plea bargains. Monica broke first, confessing everything in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. She provided prosecutors with additional evidence about David's crimes, including details about money laundering and tax evasion that the FBI hadn't discovered yet. Monica's confession revealed that David had been planning Sarah's murder for over a year. The pregnancy had only accelerated his timeline because he wanted to eliminate both Sarah and the baby before they could interfere with his escape plans. Monica admitted that David had never loved Sarah and had married her only for her family's wealth and social connections. David's company stock price collapsed as news of his arrest spread through the business community. The board of directors immediately fired him and froze all his assets pending a full investigation. Martinez Industries faced bankruptcy as clients canceled contracts and investors pulled their money out of the company. Sarah received dozens of phone calls from reporters wanting to interview her about the shocking case. She declined all interviews, preferring to let the legal system handle her revenge. Emma helped screen the calls and kept Sarah away from the media circus surrounding David's arrest. The stolen money was traced through international bank accounts with help from Swiss authorities. David and Monica had hidden over $25 million in various countries, thinking they could retrieve it after Sarah's death. Instead, the money was frozen and would eventually be returned to Martinez Industries and its investors. David's trial date was set for 6 months later, giving prosecutors time to build an airtight case. The evidence was so overwhelming that David's lawyer suggested he should plead guilty and cooperate with authorities in hopes of avoiding the death penalty. Attempted murder of a pregnant woman was considered especially serious by the legal system. Sarah began the difficult process of divorcing David and untangling their shared finances. She discovered that David had been stealing from her personal accounts as well as his company, using her money to fund his affair with Monica and pay for the hired killers. Everything they had built together was based on lies and theft. 6 months after David's arrest, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful, healthy daughter. She named the baby Hope, symbolizing her new beginning and faith in the future. As Sarah held her daughter for the first time, she felt overwhelming gratitude that they had both survived David's deadly betrayal. Hope would never know the father who had tried to kill her before she was born. David's trial became one of the most watched criminal cases in the city. The evidence was so overwhelming that his defense attorney could only argue for life in prison instead of the death penalty. The recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony from the hired killers left no doubt about David's guilt. Monica had already pleaded guilty and was cooperating fully with prosecutors. Sarah attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row with baby Hope in her arms. She wanted David to see what he had tried to destroy and what his greed had cost him. David rarely looked in her direction, but when he did, Sarah saw only emptiness in his eyes. The charming man she had married was completely gone, replaced by a broken criminal facing life in prison. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before finding David guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for attempted murder, conspiracy, and multiple counts of embezzlement. Monica received 25 years for her role in the crimes, though she might be released earlier for good behavior and cooperation. Sarah's revenge was only beginning with David's imprisonment. The civil lawsuits that followed the criminal trial gave her control over everything David had worked to build. The court awarded Sarah ownership of Martinez Industries as compensation for David's theft and attempted murder. She also recovered all the stolen money from the international bank accounts. Taking over David's company was Sarah's ultimate victory. The business that David had built through lies and crime now belonged to the woman he had tried to eliminate. Sarah's first act as the new CEO was to rename the company Hope Industries in honor of her daughter. She was determined to turn David's corrupt legacy into something positive and honest. Under Sarah's leadership, Hope Industries became one of the most successful female-led businesses in the country. Sarah hired new managers who shared her values of honesty and integrity. She returned stolen money to investors and clients, rebuilding the company's reputation through hard work and ethical practices. Within 2 years, Hope Industries was more profitable than it had ever been under David's management. Sarah used her wealth and success to establish the Hope Foundation, a charity organization that helped women escape dangerous relationships. She wanted to prevent other women from experiencing the terror and betrayal she had endured with David. The foundation provided legal assistance, safe housing, and financial support to women whose lives were threatened by abusive partners. The irony of Sarah's success was not lost on anyone who knew the story. David's attempt to eliminate Sarah and steal her inheritance had instead made her more powerful and wealthy than ever before. He now spent his days in a prison cell while Sarah controlled the empire he had built. His greed had destroyed his own life while elevating the woman he had betrayed. Sarah occasionally received letters from David in prison, begging for forgiveness and claiming he still loved her. She never responded to these pathetic attempts at manipulation. David had made his choices and would live with the consequences for the rest of his life. Sarah had moved on completely and felt nothing but indifference toward her former husband. Hope grew into a happy, confident child who never lacked for anything. Sarah made sure her daughter understood the importance of honesty, kindness, and standing up to bullies. Hope would inherit a business empire built on ethical principles rather than the corruption that had originally created it. 5 years after David's imprisonment, Sarah met a kind man named Michael who loved both her and Hope unconditionally. Their relationship was built on trust and mutual respect, everything that Sarah's marriage to David had lacked. Michael supported Sarah's work with the Hope Foundation and helped her create the loving family she had always wanted. Sarah sometimes reflected on how different her life might have been if David's murder plan had succeeded. Instead of being a victim, she had become a survivor who used her experience to help others. Her company employed hundreds of people and provided honest services to clients around the world. The Hope Foundation had helped over 1,000 women escape dangerous situations. The ultimate revenge wasn't just surviving David's betrayal, but thriving beyond his wildest dreams. Sarah had taken everything he valued and turned it into something meaningful and positive. While David rotted in prison with nothing but regret and bitterness, Sarah lived a life filled with love, success, and purpose. As Sarah tucked Hope into bed each night, she smiled knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while justice takes its course. David had tried to eliminate her from his story, but instead she had become the author of her own happy ending.